Yo, what's going on, Jay? Your stream's working? Cool. Andres, what's going on, man? We're going to discuss some fun stuff today. Just getting everything set up. It's going swimmingly. I think things are... Oh, Discord. Yeah, put this here. Cool. What's new today? Today, we're going to get into some stuff with... Looks like a court ruling. Not in Google's favor. Big win for us. Big win for us, guys. That's going to be manna from heaven. Just found out about that hour or so ago. Thanks, Kat. Kat should be here shortly. Then we're going to talk about some of this open model stuff, some things that Dario's been saying. Some of this I think has been around for a while, but some of it is... Yeah, we're all living in the Matrix, brother. And some of the Dario things may have been around a little while, but I think they have particular relevance with some of the stuff that... Judge, what's going on? Yep. Yeah, this one lawsuit in particular is... I really like, because I think it's gonna have a ripple effect, and it's gonna cause a bunch of changes, not just for Google, but for a bunch of other AI companies, and change the way that they work, because their prior approach of spewing out nonsensical slop, they're going to be held accountable for some of this stuff. And I love that, because they've been trying to push that crap off to us, and the U.S. government basically just threw the hammer down and said, nah, that's not how that's going to be. You guys created this slop. You're going to take accountability for it. Did I see... BTC is the last thing standing in the air? I don't think so, Jay. Maybe drop a link? We need Project Mayhem for data centers. Yeah, I'm not sure I know exactly what you're saying, Judge, but I think I have a little bit of a hint on it. By the way, for you IGers and TikTokers, you may want to hop to Twitch or YouTube. I'm seriously debating having tonight be a stream marathon. I haven't done one of these in a while, and I mean like serious stream marathon. We'll go at least 4 hours. And just one time, I did a 10-hour stream. It was pretty awesome. And I generally can only do those marathon streams if I start the stream and I'm like fully fresh. And YouTube is Goju Tech Talk. So just YouTube at I'll show you. Right here. Let me drop it into... What if I can drop this into... this guy yet? I don't think this actually sends it to you guys yet. There's still more. We're slowly chipping away. Me and Claude are slowly chipping away at some of the bugs. Kat, what's going on? Good to see you. I'm glad you're here, because you are a key participant in this story. Let me drop this over there. So for IGers, if you need to be on IG, stay on IG. That's cool. But you're only seeing a sliver of a whole bunch of stuff. And I'll try to keep it central to you guys. But if you can hop over to YouTube or Twitch, either of those is fine, you'll see my whole screen. Unless IG and TikTok show full screen, which would be cool. But I don't think they do that yet. But do whatever is best for you. Just know that those two platforms, you'll be able to see a lot more of the true madness that's on my screen. Have I read DCC? I don't think so. Judge, what is that? Is that like DC Comics? The most elite software for real free content creation. BTC enthusiasts are those who love free speech and journalists at its pure non-bias. Oh, that's cool. Dungeon Crawler Carl. That's DCC. Oh, cool. No, I don't. Definitely sounds like my cup of tea, though. You know me and RPGs. I'm a huge. You mentioned Dungeon Crawler, and I think, where's the video game? Send it over. By the way, check this out. As we're getting started, speaking of video games, this is my case, my new case for my Steam Deck. Check out how like awesome this baby is. And what's great about this is these handles are actually rubberized. They're not the typical plastic. So for you nerds, and I know pretty much all of you are, that you can hold this, and this makes your Steam Deck like much easier to get deep down the rabbit holes. I'm currently playing. What am I playing? Hold on, what's it called? It's like the Spire. What is this game? I'm playing this game. It's this card game. It's pretty cool. I forget the name of this. Spiral something. I don't want to. Hold on. What if I'm in the middle of a battle. I don't want to quit out. Slay the Spire 2? I don't know. It's pretty cool. It's good, like casual. You can pick it up, play it for a couple of minutes, turn it off, get back to work. That kind of thing. Good for me. Oh, yeah. Tom, what's up, brother? That's so sweet. Yeah. Let's follow what Tom just said. I love doing roll call on where everybody's dialing in from. So, NorCal over here. Where are you guys coming in? Tom's dialing in from England. What time is it in England right now? At some point, I'm going to have, like, global time zones memorized. Artie! Artie, what's going on, man? Slay the Spire. That's what I'm playing. Yeah, Slay the Spire. 2. The second one. Very cool game. For those of you that like card games and stuff. Okay. So, people are rolling in. We're going to discuss. Here, we'll add. Whoops, not on that. Over on this one. We should have this be a poll. Okay. Should Koju try to do a marathon stream today? Right now. Is our question. Oh, do I have to give it a number? And we'll call this P2. Answer 1, yes. Answer 2, hell yes. Answer 3, no. Let the poor guy stop after 10 hours. No. I have to have other things to do than listen to Goju for 12 hours. Okay, there we go. This is going to be our poll. How do I activate this thing? Control enter? That didn't work. I think I pressed Control J or something. What? Did I not? Oh, maybe the colon isn't like the colon. Okay, Control J. Did that work? For missing. Huh. Maybe it doesn't like the extra. We're gonna figure this out. Maybe it will figure it out. Polls. Report missing. Let's try to add this stuff back. Maybe it was complaining about something else. Alright, here's what we're gonna do. We take all that fun, drop it over here, and we blame Claude. Claude, I can't create a new poll. I think the syntax is right. What am I doing wrong? There we go. We'll have Claudie sit around and think about that. Dino, what's going on? Good to see you. Austin, Texas, in the house. We've got England, NorCal, Texas. Kat from Utah. Yeah, I don't know if I will. Oh yeah, this is. We'll close this time being. I may fall asleep too if I try to do a 10-hour stream. I actually have almost fallen asleep on a stream before, one time. Raise your hand if you were on that stream. It was literally only one time of the dozens or hundreds of streams that I've done. But I made a promise that I would stream that night, and I was totally fried. I was like massively sleep deprived. And I was like, I made a promise, I'm gonna go stream. And I got on, and I was literally falling asleep on the stream. I was like, it was pretty bad. And then people were DMing me saying, "Goju, hang up. You're making an idiot out of yourself." And I was like, no, this is what the people want. It's real. But they were right. Yeah, streaming while falling asleep is maybe. My partner yelled at me after that. She was also on the stream. She was not happy. So yeah, I promise if I start getting tired, if I do this marathon stream, and keep in mind, for me to volunteer to do a marathon stream, a couple things have to be all aligned. And one, I have to have slept really well the night before. And 90% of the time, I don't sleep well, so I don't even offer it. That I can last 2 to 4 hours, and even if I'm massively sleep deprived, that's fine. But then my cognitive function starts to devolve, and then I need a break. But an amazing thing happened last night. I slept well. So I think it's because I had 3 or 4 days of sleep deprivation in a row, and my body finally was like, all right, you actually have to collapse. So I did, and I'm feeling real good. Plus, we got a lot of interesting stuff to talk about. So this Google lawsuit thing, Kat just shared this with me. She's on. That's Kat, Design Cycle. And this is going to be lots of fun. And then I want to talk about this nuanced stuff with these open models, because I'm going to have a bit of a slightly different take than I usually do when Dario talks, because usually when Dario talks, I get angry because I think that he's just saying a lot of dumb things that I don't agree with. But in this particular case, he's not completely. It's more complicated than that. It's definitely one of those shades of gray things where I want to try really hard to be fair and look at the complexity of this, because I do think it's pretty complex. By the way, guys, check this out. You know, I was saying that YouTube was totally horked on the algorithm. You know, the algorithm was completely broken for our shorts, and that it was driving me crazy because we're getting all this traction. And mostly, you know, I don't really care about the numbers. I care more just about awareness, so people know what's going on, right? So everybody can disagree with me. I don't have any notions that I'm right about stuff. But when I'm being like shadow banned by YouTube, which, by the way, I'm fairly certain I was, but I think the shadow ban has been lifted. But so, you know, our following on YouTube is large-ish. And even if you assume 90% of these people are bots, let's just go with that. That still gives us quite a bit of real people, right? That's still an order of magnitude larger than IG. Okay? Even if 90% are bots, let's just pretend that it is. So then if you look at the traction of these clips, you would still expect that the visibility on YouTube would be an order of magnitude more, right, than what we get on IG. At least that's how the math works in my head. So for example, if you see, this is all YouTube stuff, cross-listed for YouTube and IG. And here you can see, you know, 2,000 views or so for these videos. Not bad at all, right? I'm not like complaining or anything. But then we go to IG and we look at like the similar videos. I guess we'll just pick one of these at the top. We can see, how do I see the views? I don't know, it's on here somewhere. Okay, so this one has 8,000 views. Okay, hold on. But some of these, like this guy over here, this guy has, you know, 120,000 views. And there's a lot that are in the 100,000 view range. There's like I don't think any of our clips have broken 1 million views on IG yet. There's a few videos on YouTube that have gone viral, like the ones on software, future of software. They've gone viral. Hold on one second. I just want to check to see. Oh, sweet. Huh. Seeing something stalling out here on our chat. Give me a second. I'll circle back to that topic. Okay, maybe it's just delayed. Okay, yeah, I think that's it. Anyway, so you'll have, like, for the reasonable, kind of the average baseline videos or clips that I'm dropping on IG, they're getting, I don't know, 20 to 50,000 views. And then some of them that people get pretty fire about, they'll break 100,000. And then there's a few that will get people really fiery about, and you get like 500,000. At least that's just for our tiny little presence on IG. But then if you go over to YouTube, what you'll see is there's like this flat it's almost like this is like a bare minimum to make it feel like YouTube's trying. It's like, oh, look, you have thousands of views, which is true, right? It's like, look, we're trying, Goju. It's just nobody likes your shit, right? And that's entirely possible. I fully concede that. But if the same people are watching from YouTube and IG, and I realize it is a slightly different audience, that I think IG's more active and has a lot more of the pulse of our crowd, our GDT crowd. So I do think there's potentially a little bit of a better alignment for AI and stuff. And maybe YouTube's more long form, right? And I do think that YouTube Shorts kind of sucks compared to IG Reels. Just the delivery mechanism, the interface. Like, IG is just kind of the bomb, I think. I like it a lot. It's just good software. Anyway, so as you guys know, I was doing some of this stuff where, as Yara's mentioning, yeah, good call, Yara. We're going to get there. I've got some stuff to say about Google when they do stuff that I don't love. And I'm not going to not talk about that just because it's going to be posted on YouTube, which is a subsidiary of Google. Welcome, Funk. We're in Australia, by the way, my friend. But so, as you guys know, I'm pretty critical, or I like to be honest on the things that I see. And I see some shady stuff happening with Google. Obviously, I'm not alone, since this just happened. Can everybody see this? Oh, I just want to get this centered the right way. Southwest Australia. Awesome. I love Australia. Such a cool place. Kind of hot in the summers. Might be, yeah. Yeah, I have a feeling I might be de-Googling. I don't know what I'm going to do for my phone, though. I don't know. You've got iOS and Android, and which is the less of two evils here? I don't know. Winters are great, though, right? In Australia. I mean, it's heavenly. It's kind of like Arizona in the winter. Everybody wants to go to Arizona in the winter. I actually think NorCal's just fine in the winter, too. Me being a Coloradan and having 25 years of snow, ice stuff over there for a very long time is, it's nice to have a break from that. Don't get me wrong. I love winter sports and stuff, but, driving on ice and things is not my favorite thing to do. By the way, I'm seeing that we're live for all the places, but I haven't seen anybody on Twitch. If there's anybody on right now that's on Twitch, if you could hop over to Twitch real quick just to see. I think it's working. It says it's working. Graphene OS, and Pixel Phone is in the move for the next 6 to 12 months. Interesting. Oh, right, yeah. Thanks for reminding me, Colin, about that Commodore phone. Yeah, just the Commodore name is bringing me back to memory lane, right? Commodore 64 is the original gaming machine for, yeah. Oh, looks like Dale's going to criticize me here. Let's see what he has to say. Justin, you're criticizing Google and Anthropic for opaque cloud dependencies, but Mentor's own installer routes local code to OpenAI via hard-coded S-key project keys. Isn't Merle doing the exact same thing? Well, let's try to answer that fairly. So the way that Mentor works is it uses deterministic intent folding. And most of the analysis that I'm even going to look at this. Here's how fair I am. I'm even going to give you a heart when you ask this critical question. First of all of the major inference that's going on is happening locally on your machine because diff uses local models. Also, the diff models are completely deterministic. They're not stochastic. And you have complete control over those on your local machine. Now, if you want, and you don't have to, but if you want stochastic answers from things like Mentor summaries or Mentor insights, diff is not a stochastic system, and we don't have enough support with the local stochastic models. So in order to provide an answer for that, we have to invoke the cloud models. But you don't have to use that, Dale. You can just use the diff part and do everything local. There's a button inside of Mentor that says you can do this in a totally private way, and it won't interface with the cloud at all. We also have to keep in mind that that's work of dozens of engineers, and as the CEO, I don't know every little thing that's going on that they've been working on for the last 4 years. No CEO does, right? The best that we can do is have a general sense of the stuff, and so that's what I know. Did they engineer this the best possible way? Maybe not. But the shift now is to SLMs. Now, when Mentor was originally built, there were no SLMs. So the only way that we could support any kind of stochastic answers for solutions on the defects is to invoke the LLMs. Now, the critique that I have for Anthropic and Google is manifold. First, Mentor doesn't in any way try to fight against SLMs. We love SLMs. In fact, SLMs work with Mentor. We have an SLM now that works locally. On top of that, Mentor can run completely private without any cloud interface at all. You don't have to interface with the cloud. That's why many of the customers that use it, is that you don't send your code ever to Merle. The only thing that you would send out is just the snippet of thing that Mentor has found that's broken, and you don't even send that to us. You would just send that to whoever the LLM provider is that should be selectable within Mentor, and that's really your choice. So, good question, but the critiques that I have for these guys are very different than what Mentor is doing. Now, keep in mind that this Mentor thing, this Merle thing, this is all going away, that we are closing down that effort, and the effort that I'm pursuing now is the GIS system. That's going to be built in a completely local way. There will be no LLM involvement, and it's. To be totally honest, Dale, it's a fair criticism, right? And I don't love that it does this. And now we're at the point where we don't have to do this, which is part of the split from doing this. Also, the way that this infrastructure, this was a good science experiment to verify that the inventions would work. But now what we need to do is build it the right way, which is why I'm now building it entirely myself. Is I have to build the whole thing on my own, at least the infrastructure, because it's just too complicated and has too many moving pieces. And unfortunately, most people that work in industry, they don't love the stuff like I do. And that's kind of the difference between, at least in my mind, this is the difference between truly world-class people and just good people. World-class people, they eat, breathe, drink, sleep this stuff. Like, I'm never not thinking about this stuff. It matters to me that much. But most people that work in industry, like, they care and they may be good, but they can't not sleep because of this, right? They can turn their brain off and work on other things. And I can't. Like, this is part of the reason why I get so sleep deprived, is I just can't sleep. Is in my head, I'm like, okay, so we need to build this, and this needs to come. And you generally find, at least this has been my experience, is you find people like this that are diehard in the open source community, and you find people like this that are diehard in academia as professors. And they can exist elsewhere. I think founders also have this kind of fire, but it's really difficult line to straddle because companies need to be profitable or they need to make enough money to survive. But you will find one-offs like Meredith Whittaker, who I think absolutely, you can tell just by the way she talks that she deeply cares. I think one of the key signs about people that deeply care is they often know so much about a topic that it's undeniable about how much they care. That you wouldn't be able to know all those things unless you obsessed over it. And that's like one of the things that I look for when people talk about these things. Like, for example, Dale, one of the things I like about you is you care. And the reason why I can tell you care is you'll ask questions like that because you're deeply thinking about it, which is why I don't like mute you or boot you or kick you. In fact, I instead just try to help you refine your questions to ask them in maybe a slightly warmer way, but to keep being curious and keep being critical. I think that's really, really important. And I love that. So anyway, the future GS system will not have any of those weaknesses that you pointed out. And those are absolutely 100% fair criticisms. So Dale's right on the money, and I like that. So good call. Okay. I think great to have you from Malaysia. That's wonderful. Where in Malaysia? I think the most important takeaway is leveraging the power of LLMs in SLMs. Yes, absolutely. I think that's like basically trying to distill out as much of the capabilities that we can in the SLMs. And I think the only way to do that is to make them specialized. I mean, we could talk in grandiose, idealistic terms and say, we're going to have all the stuff that the LLMs have in SLMs, and it's going to be wonderful and all that. And then reality is going to kick in, and we're not going to be able to do that because they're generalized. And there are trade-offs in actual science. And the trade-off is, in order for them to run locally, with local compute and local space, you have to remove something, right? And that something is the generalizability. But I think that that's totally fine because when you think about people using AI models, I think oftentimes for tasks, they don't need it to work on 100 different domains at once, right? They can have the programming SLM be available when they're doing coding. And then they can have the creative writing SLM kick in when they're writing emails or proposals or something. And then they can have the language translation one kick in when they're writing articles that are going to go to their friends or their customers or whatever in other countries that speak different languages, right? So you will rotate in and out of these SLMs based on what you're trying to do. The way I think about it is almost like video games, right? So for all of you hardcore video gamers, you probably have 100 different video games in your Steam. But are you playing 100 games at once? You're not. Okay, maybe some of you are, right? But for me, I'm mostly 5 games. But I have all those games that I can switch over to when I have the desire, but I don't need them all resident in memory all at once. The same philosophy is what we're going to do with SLMs, is that we'll have all of the SLMs that are focused in the different domain, but we'll only activate the ones for the tasks that we're working on, and then that makes it amendable. That makes this solution work. And of course, I think big tech doesn't want you to think that that's possible. They want to make you believe that you have to use these LLMs that are be all and end all, but that has nothing to do with like the reality of the situation. Let's hold that thought for a second, because I want to go back to our polling thing. Okay. So let's see. What does it say? Let's see if I can re-enter this poll. Okay, that's cool. It actually saved it. Okay. Go. Poll. Here. You know what it needs? It needs this. I don't know if you guys know this, but Claude tends to be so good about this. When it makes mistakes, all you need to do is literally just drop in the screenshot on the thing that you're talking about, and then oftentimes it'll realize, oh, right, I was messing this up. That's one of the things that we might lose as a trade-off as we shift to these SLMs, is aspects like that. But maybe not. Like, part of what makes these LLMs work are the library utilities that you add to it that enhance their capabilities. And so many of the things that I have Claude doing are due to the additional things that I've added to it in my sandbox. With a bare bones Claude, it doesn't do many of the things that it can do now. So the truth is, I kind of maybe take that earlier comment back, that it depends. It depends on if you need deterministic or stochastic behavior. If you need deterministic behavior, there probably are software libraries that we can leverage that will enhance the SLM's behavior that are not going to be restricted to just LLMs. But if it's stochastic behavior, then you might need the LLMs for that. And if what I'm saying right now doesn't make sense to you, that's okay. We'll circle back to this at some point. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the big thing about, like, I love this comment, Kat, is that the big thing that, I'm going to close this again, that I really think is the future is leveraging AI simply to build the software systems to do the things that don't exist right now. And then once those are built, then you use the software systems that function in a deterministic way to do the thing that didn't exist. Like, for example, with GTT, the VOD pipeline system that I have in place, it's mostly deterministic software. I've just used a stochastic system to help build the deterministic software to do the VOD pipeline. And now that that's built, the stochastic AI doesn't do much. And I think that's actually a big reason why they are doing this IPO madness frenzy, is they've realized very quickly that stochastic AIs are not going in any way to displant or remove traditional deterministic software. That is still going to run the world as it should, because stochastic systems running the world makes zero sense to me. And all they're going to be really is helpers. They are assistants to the real systems, which are the deterministic systems that run the world. But they don't play a key role in any of this. Their role is secondary. I think that's part of their observation. They're likely not going to say this in public, right? Because that would hurt their valuation and all that stuff. Sean, what's going on, man? Good to see you, buddy. Let's see where we are with our... Oh, okay. It says it needs a restart here. Okay, let's do this. Okay. Restart both. All right. Now, assuming that it gets this sorted, we'll then have our second poll. We'll understand who wants us to marathon and who doesn't. Not that that will have any bearing on whether I do it or not. Okay, it will. If people are super keen on it, then even if I feel like not doing it, I'll probably do it. But if I really want to do it, I'll probably still do it. Even if people are like, nah, I'm going to check out after an hour, bro. Okay, so while Claude's figuring that out, let's start with Dario number 1 that got this all started for me. Sweet, yeah, we'll talk code for sure. We're going to talk code, AI. We're going to talk about some of this lunacy and the stuff with Dario and the stuff with Google. Those are pretty deep topics. All right, let's go with this first one.
Scaling of open source models, I think it's going down a very dangerous path. And if the path continues, I think we could get to a very dangerous place. I think it's worth saying some things on open source models that are clear to all the experts, but I want to make sure is understood by this committee, which is when you control a model and you're deploying it, you have the ability to monitor its usage. It might be misused at one point, but then you can alter the model, you can revoke a user's access, you can change what the model is willing to do. When a model is released in an uncontrolled manner, there's no ability to do that. It's entirely out of your hands. And so I think that should be attended to carefully. There may be ways to release models open source so that it's harder to circumvent the guardrails, but that's a much harder problem, and we should confront the advocates of this with that problem and challenge them to solve it. Finally, I'd say open source is a little bit of a misnomer here, right? Open source normally refers to, smaller developers who are iterating quickly, and I think that's a good thing. But I think here we're talking about something a little bit different, which is a more uncontrolled release of larger models by, again, to your point, Senator Hawley, like much larger entities that pay tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars to train them. I think we should think of that in a little bit of a different category, and
Lies.
obligations in a little bit of a different category. The scaling of
Okay, let's watch this one more time. But there are some interesting points about this that I want to get into, because there are some concerns, I think. But most of that has to do with China. And I'm going to try to give you my real take on this. And I do think that China's not giving any open source, open weight models to us out of friendliness and kindness and love and kumbaya. I think that there's a very deep strategic plan. It's a political plan, and it works to their advantage, not to anyone else's advantage. And I think we all need to minimally be aware of that, because I think that there will be a point to where China will flip that switch and things can go sideways in a major way. Now, one second, let's see. Okay, hold on. To restart the chat too. Don't do that. Whatever. So there is a concern, I think. Of course, I think that what he's doing here is he's when in Rome, do as the Romans, and so he's talking to a lot of people that are. This is in front of the U.S. Senate or Congress, and what I think he's doing is he's pitching his story in a way that will try to increase fear and uncertainty, knowing that the people he's presenting to are in a very deep and entrenched political game between China with AI, and that's at the forefront of their mind. And so he's drawing attention to the open weight Chinese models without necessarily calling that out, and then also creating a narrative that is making it seem as though the closed model companies are the good guys. And it's so great because everything's in our control and all of that stuff. You want that. So he's telling, I think, a very one-sided story here that it really aligns to big tech propaganda, which is okay, Claude. Figure it out, dum-dum. You got it. So the story is principally rooted in making it appear like big tech is doing all the good things that are going to make the world phenomenal and all that, and open source is just going to cause the downfall of the United States government and society at large. Right. And it's not going to do that at all. I think it's going to do the opposite. It's going to prevent big tech from owning the world and keeping them honest. And this is very much reminiscent of the Microsoft operating system wars back in the 1980s or 90s, when they were coming out talking about how bad open source was for Linux. And they tried to do the same shenanigans. And a lot of it is lies. But I do think that different than the operating system wars back in the 90s or whenever that was, there is another threat here, and that is from open weight models from China. And I think that there is a very serious risk of using open source from China and the things that they will potentially build into those models that could be activated at any point in the future. And keep in mind, they're very smart and they're very slow on their activity. So they're not going to show you any sign of desperation where they need to trigger these bad things right away. It's going to be a slow burn. Very much like, if you're not familiar with the XC lib backdoor, you can read up on that, but that was a 2.5-3 year effort that what we believe are nation state actors from China, and the whole purpose of this was to inject a massive exploit into the Linux kernel to sow distrust of open source across the open source community. And I think they succeeded in that to some degree. It wasn't that they were trying to actually backdoor any system. They're thinking much, much bigger than that, because open source is a major threat to their existence. Open source is, in my mind, one of the key ways that the rest of the world can compete with China, because it leverages our superpowers, which is us working collectively together on some sort of common good. And if we don't have that, then I think the CCP is going to be owning pretty much all of this. So after they realized that they kind of couldn't shut down open source, them being the CCP, the next move is to, if you can't beat them, join them. So they started working on these open models, these open weight systems. And many of the things that they're doing, right, is like there's this huge effort to distill the Anthropic models by simply creating like these 25,000 fake accounts and then just basically mining all the answers from Anthropic and OpenAI to create DeepSeek and Kimi and Gwen or whatever, without paying any of the cost of like actually training on those systems. Now, in all fairness, Anthropic and OpenAI didn't really pay all the costs either. That they're following a very similar approach of, I think I can shut this now. A very similar, or not, a very similar approach to what China did, which is to have a whole bunch of data that's not their data and use that to train their models. So I do think it's a lot of the kettle calling the pot black here when OpenAI and Anthropic are trying to call Moonshot AI or whoever out, Alibaba out, on distilling their models, when Anthropic and OpenAI basically did the same thing, right? Like that's just, I think there's a huge amount of irony on this, that Moonshot AI and Alibaba are basically just doing what OpenAI and Anthropic have done, but rather than stealing the data from people in the world, which is what OpenAI and Anthropic did, Alibaba and company, they're just stealing it from the companies. And in my mind, you can't really steal what's already stolen. And I don't know that I have too many issues with them being served the thing that they've been serving all of us. That said, I do think that using those open models from China are a potential major danger, in that in my mind there really is nothing that's free. And when we get a massive government involved that starts giving us stuff for free, the first thing that triggers in my mind are, what is the actual cost here? Because this is not being done just out of kindness. And I think that the actual cost of this is that there is an end game here. And that end game is going to benefit the CCP. It's not going to benefit us. And if you sort of walk this out in your head and think about how this could unravel, we don't know exactly what is in these models outside of like ancillary to the model itself. What I mean by that is there may be stuff hidden inside of the model that is unclear. Like there may be a way to trigger these to go into self-destruct mode, that there's a certain key phrase. It's kind of like, think of your favorite spy movie, and you have the sleeper agents, and then they get told a certain phrase, and then it activates something, could very well be that that's exactly what happens in these models. Like 100%, you can build AI models to do this. That they're really good at pattern recognition, and there could be a certain pattern that, when fed, unlocks their behavior to do something totally different, and you never see that behavior unless that specific input is given to them. You can absolutely build it to do this. It could be that that is what exists already in those open weight models. It's a very complicated thing to do, but this is a very complicated group of people that are hyper intelligent and can figure out really complicated things. But that's not the only path. The other path is that there could be this fake notion of trust, right? This is how they hacked into the Linux open source, is they over time created a sense of trust, like they're good actors. They're playing the long game. It's a long burn. And from that, after a while, people start putting their guard down, because you're like, well, if they were going to do something bad, they would have done it already, right? Not necessarily, right? It's the whole sleeper agent. Think about the big spy games and how long those people sit in those situations idle, undercover, without any hint that they're working for like the other side. So I think another angle is that there's just a huge amount of trust that gets built implicitly because people are using this for such a long period of time, they forget the ramifications of this. And then one day in the future, there's a flip that's switched because people are just using ancillary services that are part of these open weight systems. So these are actual binaries that are used to support them, to make them function in a better way, right? Things like what I'm building with GCC, that's going to be used to help accelerate the development of the GIS system. These are external to the actual AI system. They're like helper things. And it's very easy to embed malicious things inside of these helper things, these helper apps. So now if we go back to what Dario was saying, when it comes to using Chinese models, again, I think many of you know, I worked in the classified sector for over a decade. There's some stuff that goes on behind closed doors, and it's not all puppy dogs and rainbows. And we're talking about people that can act in a very strategic, slow burn way to achieve their goals. And if they can, there's many angles that would benefit China by using open source or open weight models, right? One of the first is they could effectively cripple the United States economy. I mean, not really, but that's one of the plays here. And the play is that if they can get everyone using their open weight models, then the big AI companies in the US will flounder, and those companies would essentially dissolve or whatever. Now, them dissolving is not the thing that really matters here. What really matters is advancement of AI research beyond where it is today at a community level. If I were to speculate, what I think that the Chinese models are aiming to do is to undermine many of the commercial entities, specifically XAI, OpenAI, and Anthropic, by offering these open weight models for free and then allowing people to use them in a way that costs significantly less. So then those companies go out of business. And the bigger side effect of that is to halt AI research. That's the piece. That's the long game. So whether or not OpenAI or Anthropic have some sort of valuation in the billions or trillions of dollars is like, who cares? It's more about shutting down advances in AI research that don't exist inside of China, because then China can win the big game, which is the AI race. So that's one side of this. Is I do think that there is a very serious concern about using Chinese open weight models. And as many of you have heard from me, I don't advocate anyone use them for all these reasons. That I don't believe that their intentions are wholesome, not for a second. I think that there is an abundance of evidence that shows that they've done pretty malicious things, and they're very patient. And so just because things are puppy dogs and rainbows today doesn't mean that they will be tomorrow. And so you're putting yourself at major risk if you use these models. Now, if you have to use these models, then minimally make sure that it's sandboxed. Make sure that it's not on your own local box. Please do yourself a favor. You can thank me in 2 years or 3 years when they activate that sleeper agent and you don't get totally owned. And if you don't do this and then you get totally owned 2 to 3 years from now, just like I was warning about the AI takeover stuff, and a lot of people were saying, oh, this is just nonsense, not going to happen. And now it's happening en masse. Like, don't be one of those people. Like, just do the smart thing here and sandbox yourself if you use them, or do the smarter thing, don't use them at all. And instead, we work on creating our own open weight models, which is part of what we're working on with GTT. And there are some other ones, like the IBM Granite model, that's open for people to use, and even Meta's system. So now if you go back to what Dario is talking about, it's interesting because while at the high level, I disagree with what he's saying. I think that he has a clear bias on not using any open weight systems because of just corporate greed. As sad as it is to say, I think it's crazy that he would try to leverage fear. And it's not to say that the things he's saying are wrong. Like, yes, the AI models, if they were open, people would have access to, and they would be able to use them. That's exactly right. That's exactly how open source is today. People can use them however they want. And we rely on that because that allows us as the people of the world to make forward progress. And then Linux becomes the most commonly used operating system in the world, which I believe it is today, if you think about Android. So that sounds like it's beneficial to me. That doesn't sound like it's hurting people. In all fairness, though, I think that what's interesting about Dario, this is just my speculation, is I think Dario actually kind of believes these things. I don't think that he's exactly like Sam Altman, where I think Sam Altman is mostly selling lies, and it's just all about like him making money. I think Dario, in some ways, is so in outer space with this AI hysteria that he's kind of like, it's strange to me, given that I would expect that he would have a stronger footing on reality, but maybe I give him too much credit. But many of the like fantasy worlds he's living in, I don't imagine it's going to be anything like what he's talking about. And I do think that they're powerful, but at least from the way that I'm using it, I mean, these state-of-the-art, super intelligent systems can't figure out even the most basic stuff on the daily. Like, I'm not worried about these things coming and taking over the planet anytime soon. And if they were, I would much prefer that those models are in the hands of the people than in the hands of corporate greed. So I absolutely disagree with him on that front. I think that it's much better for everybody if it's open. And on top of that, that's the way the world's advanced just like over the last several centuries with open science, right? Like if science was closed like he's proposing, then we wouldn't have academia, like we wouldn't have open knowledge. So the idea of trying to lock this down behind closed doors because you're worried they're going to be all powerful is, I think, a completely bogus narrative. I don't subscribe to that at all. I think it needs to be open, and it's going to benefit significantly more people when it's open. I'm seriously disappointed that he would try to present this as any kind of reasonable argument, especially in front of Congress, who may not be the expert that other people are. So they're just going to maybe take this at face value. But unfortunately, it's not as simple as just all the open stuff is good, because I don't believe that either. I think that we have to be very careful about the Chinese models and not use them, because I don't believe that their end game is in the best interest of anyone but the CCP. That's my strong conviction. Now, with that being said, we've been going for over an hour. I need a bio break, so let's put this in a pause for the moment, and we're going to take 5, and we'll come right back. Okay. All right. I'm back with 2 minutes to spare. Hold on a second. Yo, yo, yo. Hey, Purple. What's going on? Yeah, I love this cat. Hold on, it's 100%. This is very much how I am. I'm very much not a doomer, but I watch patterns, and I look at evidence. And when I see patterns being repeated over time from the same people, I start to believe that that pattern is the pattern that's going to emerge next. And so when I've seen lots of patterns from the CCP, I believe that that pattern is going to persist until I see evidence emerging of the opposite pattern. And I haven't yet seen that. Let's see if we can get this second poll to work now. Yeah, I didn't think so. Oh, maybe I need to do this. Maybe that's what it's trying to say. Huh. So stupid. Okay, it kind of makes sense. Maybe I might have designed it that way. That might have been me. Because I might have offloaded the work to figure out the number to the system. And so okay, I'm going to own it. That's a Goju mistake. Yeah. All right, so here's the new poll. And I think we might have missed a vote here. All right, so the poll is, and remember how you do the poll, you just enter the number and then your answer. Hold on, I'll show this front and center for the IGers and TikTokers. Here's the poll. So you type in P2 space and then any of these answers. So P2 space A1, A2, A3, A4, and it should automatically update this as those answers are coming in. Let's see if it can figure that out. We'll leave this right here. And apologies, I think somebody gave an answer and it didn't. Sweet. Okay, we got our first answer. Hell yes. Hell yes to one marathon stream. Kim's asking, do I believe AI will be the end of humanity? Absolutely do not believe this. I don't think that in any way, shape, or form. And there's many reasons for this, but one of the biggest is, based on my understanding of all these AI systems, the AIs themselves are not malevolent. They're also not benign. They are just whatever you create them to be. And I think there's a lot of confusion about this. If you see sort of strange behavior from AIs, it's not like that's the AI itself going sideways. A lot of times it has more to do with the fact that it's the programmers who programmed it that way to make it go sideways. And you can see this in like how agreeable they are, right? How did they become so agreeable? Part of that is they were programmed to be super agreeable because at first they weren't, and then people were upset. And then you'll see changes in their attitude. Where does that come from? That's not actually like the AI has learned that. That's from the humans programming them to do that. And then their ability to answer or not answer, that also comes from the training. So I think that it's easy to take these advances in science that are so, they may have the appearance of being wildly profound, and turn them from science into science fiction, like what we often see in the movies. But the reality of it, as strange as it is to say this, is a lot more boring than that. As someone who, primarily I'm a scientist, and science is, I love science. It's how I want to spend all my time. But a lot of it is very slow and it is very boring. And the real guts of these systems are not nearly as fantastical as I think the public or these doomer AI companies want to make it out to be. That I think it's largely just a huge amount of hype that is then causing the general public to get confused on what the reality is. And then because it's being promoted by the AI companies as so crazy powerful and it can be all and do all, then the natural byproduct of that is the lay public would take a similar type of position, but rather than casting it in a seriously good light, gets cast in a bad light. And so who do we have to blame for that? I think in many cases we have the AI companies that are hyping the hell out of this, making all these false promises. But when it comes to actually the bad things that AI has done, I think that a lot of that has really just been humans. It's the humans that made the really bad decisions to use copyrighted data to train the AIs. The AIs didn't make that decision. And a lot of people in corporate America were doing like these layoffs to have AI replace the humans, and they're quickly finding out that this was a massive error in judgment, that one of the biggest weaknesses that the AIs have that's built into them is their inability to remember things as they happen over time. And let me tell you, when you start to use the AIs on a daily basis like I am, and they can't remember the shit that they did just yesterday, it starts to get really frustrating. Because think about it like this. Think about someone that you're training. Think about it like your child or your friend or whoever, and you're trying to work with them to do stuff, and they can't remember what just happened yesterday. And so at first you're like, okay, cool, let me remind you what happened yesterday. So you do that and you go forward. And then the same thing happens tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And what you end up spending your time doing, the majority of your time, is just reminding them about all the things that they should know that they don't know. And this was the massive oversight on, I think, a lot of the AI propaganda that was being peddled, is that it was being peddled as it can do all this work. And yeah, they can do a lot of menial labor really fast. Scaffolding code, things that don't require deep thought or deep context, they're really good at that. But once you try to have them do things of substance, like they have to send an email that's actually super important, or they have to make sure that all their facts are verified, I mean, things just start to really fall apart. And if you think about workers in the U.S. workforce, a lot of the way that they do those jobs is based on their ability to remember the things that they learned from yesterday. That all that information is paramount to them being able to be effective in their job. So the AIs come in initially and they look like they're super helpful and they're getting all this work done because what you're throwing at them is mostly inconsequential labor. But then you try to have them do something that leverages the knowledge that supposedly they would have, that a normal worker would have after that worker has been there for 6 months. And they can't remember the random stuff that they were working on just a week ago. They keep stepping on top of themselves and destroying all that. This is exactly what I've seen with GCC, is that Claude continues to destroy all the stuff that it's built just from yesterday. And if I didn't have tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of tests, none of this would work. A normal person wouldn't suffer this type of catastrophic failure. So these AIs being all powerful, super powerful, I mean, we are decades, centuries away from that pipe dream. I still think that AI is super useful. I think there's a lot of work that they can help us with related to menial labor that, you know, it just makes our life better if we don't have to, I mean, spell checkers, right? Compilers, very simple tasks that don't require too much work. Making sure your stove is off when you leave the house. Stuff like this, right? Where it's important, it doesn't require a lot of historical information to make the right decision, but it can iterate through like a manifest of activities and then make the right decision. I think that stuff, it can be like wildly helpful. And that's kind of how I'm using it, is it's killing it for those types of tasks. And for the harder stuff I deal with. Someone was asking about water. Where did that go? The water stuff, yeah. So a lot of the water stuff has to do with water cooling. Okay, okay, cool. It looks like we're gonna try to do a marathon stream. We'll see how this goes. We're already an hour and a half in, so let's see what happens. We're doing great so far. We'll take breaks every hour or so to keep my blood flowing, and we'll see what happens. Now, about the water. Oh, and just as a refresher, you guys, I want to be able to use my whole screen, and I see that there's like over a dozen of you on IG, which is awesome. But you may want to hop over to not TikTok, YouTube, so you can see the whole screen. If you can. And I'm going to drop that just for you guys right now. And I'll continue to remind the IGers. And if there's anybody watching from TikTok, and I think that there might be, feel free to hop over. I'm going to use my full screen real estate for this type of stuff, especially as we start watching some of these videos. Okay, yeah, so going back to the water question, to the best of my knowledge, the water stuff is largely predicated by massive data centers. And the moment that we can shift away from huge LLMs and shift this to SLMs, we don't need the water cooling stuff. That's a problem that's specifically related to data centers that I believe the SLM movement will completely shut down. And I think that that's what we all want. I think we all want a future where the SLMs exist and everybody can use them on their own commodity. Oh, actually, this is a perfect segue to this first clip where Dario says some really stupid things. And I want us to maybe watch this now. So here we go. Yeah, Macchio, I would be really interested to hear about this. I hear these claims. I'm not doubting you, but I hear these claims about people writing 30,000 lines of code. I'm real curious if you're building a single system that is highly complex, if you're building just a whole bunch of prototypes. Prototypes are super easy. It's easy to do that because they don't have a lot of historical knowledge. There isn't a huge system that you're maintaining that has to all function correctly. And if you keep churning out MVPs, the MVPs I think are super simple. By the way, 30,000 lines of code a week, that sounds, I'm not sure if that's good, because that's a lot of code to maintain. And usually smaller code footprints tend to be easier to manage over long periods of time. So like if you really are writing 30,000 lines of code a week, then that would mean in a single year you would produce 1.5 million lines of code for a single project. That is a lot of code to manage. So if you're at 1.5 million lines of code in a single project, no AI system that I'm aware of has any ability to contextually reason about that large of a code footprint. That sounds like it's sort of an impossibility problem. To the best of my knowledge, the systems really start to struggle with the context death spiral for anything beyond like a couple thousand lines of code. So even if you were putting out 30,000 lines of code, the AI systems being able to reason about them, to enhance them, I think that you would spend all of your token burn just on reading the code, not writing any code. But maybe I'm misunderstanding. So I'd love to hear what you're saying. I think that you can do this much code if they're all MVPs and they're sort of throwaway code. Yeah, this is, I agree with you, Mac. This is sort of where I see it too. Yeah, so let's watch this thing from Dario real quick. And we can hear on, you'll probably immediately catch what I think is, I don't totally love.
Winded way of saying, I don't think open source works the same way in AI that it has worked in other areas. Primarily because with open source, you can see you can see the source code of the model. Here, we can't see inside the model. It's often called open weights instead of open source to kind of distinguish that. But a lot of the benefits, which is that many people can work on it, that it's kind of additive, it doesn't quite work in the same way. I've actually always seen it as a red herring. When I see a new model come out, I don't care whether it's open source or not. Like if we talk about DeepSeek, I don't think it mattered that DeepSeek is open source. I think I ask, is it a good model?
Right.
Is it better than us at the things that's the only thing that I care about. It actually doesn't matter either way, because ultimately you have to host it on the cloud. The people who host it on the cloud do it.
No, you don't. No. Yeah, this is... Sorry, I can't listen to this propaganda without interrupting it. No, you don't. Like, this is the fundamental disconnect from reality that I think Dario's drinking his own Kool-Aid and believing the future is only his LLM nonsense, and it isn't. I think this either is a demonstration of him intentionally misleading people, or he clearly doesn't understand AI, because the future is not LLMs, it's SLMs. And I think anybody worth their weight in knowledge of AI understands this and is shifting to this. If it were the case that all the open source models had to be hosted on the cloud and they were all large language models, I would agree. But that's not what's going on here. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to actually make it so the rest of the world can host these models and they can host all of these SLMs locally. And so you don't need to host it on a cloud. That's the whole point of it. So fundamentally and completely disagree with this argument. He's smoking something.
Inference, these are big models, they're hard to do inference on, and conversely, many of the things that you can do when you see the weights, we're increasingly offering on clouds where you can fine tune the model, you can, we're even looking at ways to kind of, investigate the active.
And now it's turned into a commercial. Like, we're no longer talking about open source or closed source. Now we're hearing a pitch about Anthropic models so we can use their stuff. By the way, I use the Anthropic models every day right now, and they're, top of class. So they are quite good. But the question was about open source and closed source. We didn't ask about what technology you have, bro. Like, your Jedi mind tricks don't work on us.
Of the model as part of like an interpretability interface. We did some little things around steering last time. So I think it's the wrong axis to think in terms of. When I think about competition, I think about like which models are good at the task that we do. I think open source is actually a red herring.
But if it's free and cheap to run,
it's not free. You have to run it on inference.
Bullshit. No, you don't. That's the whole point. So the person interviewing him is absolutely right. It is free. That's what we're building. Dum-dum. We're making these open source so then people can run them locally. So it will be free. So wrong, Dario. Completely wrong. And again, I can't tell if he's just confused or if he's pretending. If the only thing that was being released was large language models that required an entire cloud, then yes, that would be the right answer. That's not what's happening, right? Exploring single node language models. Here's a list of open single node language models. that exist today that you can download and use that require no massive cloud instance. 3 billion parameter, 8 billion parameter. This will run on high-end laptops. Fail, like complete and utter fail nonsense. Yeah, so sorry if I'm coming a little hot out the gate, but whatever, man. It's just clearly not on the... Hey, Justenia. Sorry we hung up on you the other night. Glad to have you back. Okay, so we've heard two things from Dario. Before I bust a gasket here and get real angry, I think we should shift to this Google thing. I don't think I can watch any more Dario without getting angry. So I want to shift now to this Google stuff, because I think that this is going to be a big win for all of us. And that's great. Justenia, where are you now? Justenia, are you back in East Coast? And you should have let Kat know, because I think Kat's in Utah. You guys could have caught up for a coffee or something. Okay, so Kat shared this with me earlier today. I guess, I don't know. I haven't looked at the actual source of this, so maybe we'll dig in. But this warrants our attention, I think, because this could have some really sweeping ramifications. This could create a ripple effect in a really, really good way for the community. I freaking love this. Like I am so fired up and happy about this that this is the landscape change that we want to have happen. And I can get into why I'm so excited about this in a second, because as we look at things like this, what often happens with these types of decisions is the way these court rulings work is they're often based on precedents. If there's a precedence for a decision, then that will directly influence future court cases, because they will leverage prior decisions that are made in court as precedents for the current case. So if you basically are holding AI companies accountable for bad things historically, and then there's a new court case where you're trying to do the same thing, you use that precedence of outcome to then determine the new case. And the outcome here is really freaking awesome. So let's take a look at this. Google's AI overview was just legally declared a liar. This something, what does this say? This court ruling changes how you search on your phone forever. All right, let's see what it has to say next. The expose. Google AI overviews constantly give dangerous advice, like telling people to put glue on pizza. Yeah, don't do that, guys. Don't do that. That's bad. Or giving completely wrong medical summaries. For months, tech giants hid behind the excuse, "We just index the internet, don't blame us." A court just destroyed that defense. They ruled that because AI rewrites and creates a brand new answer, Google legally owns the lie. Woo-wee! Guys. Oh man, I'm excited about this. This is so great, because now that means that these lies that you're telling, you can't just tell these lies. You are accountable for this. That whole spreading of misinformation that the AIs are like trying to push that off to whoever uses it, we're not responsible for this. No more of that. They are... How do I get this? Hold on. Maybe if I unshare this, does that go away? Okay, stop sharing. All right, whatever. It says something here. I move this. Wow. Okay. I thought IG had a great interface. I guess maybe they're not used to having words and stuff on the screen. Anyway, they're no longer a neutral search engine. The ruling completely changes how you use your phone. Here's what happened. The AI nerf to protect themselves from massive lawsuits. Google will have to heavily restrict or remove AI overviews on anything critical, meaning your search results are about to get heavily censored. I'm really excited about this for a variety of reasons, which we'll get into. The legal weapon. If Google's AI hallucinates false information that ruins your business reputation or costs you money, you now have a legal framework to fight back and hold them directly liable. The double check. Stop blindly trusting the summary box at the top of your screen. The court just proved the algorithm is a legal liability. Wow. Such fire. That is so freaking awesome. Okay, so let's talk about some of the potential, and I'd like to look at the source at some point. Maybe we'll get to that later. But let's start to think about the ramifications of this. First of all of this AI slop costs a huge amount of money to do. Yeah, absolutely. It's like such crazy fire stuff. Right. So maybe we'll start with that, Artie. You can run local AIs even in your phone. This whole Chrome Gemini Nano download thing, my thought was that they're going to use your compute resources to run the SLM locally. So they're offloading the work that would be done on the servers to reduce their cost overhead. But not considering the fact that this is going to drain your battery much faster, and you may not even know that it's being run. You may have no knowledge that that's the purpose of the Gemini Nano model. Now, again, I don't actually know, because they didn't really say what they're using it for. They're just kind of like forcing it on everybody. But if now they're going to be held liable for any of the bad stuff that the AIs are producing, there's a good chance that they're not going to run these AIs kind of willy-nilly and waste their compute resources when they can't even show those answers. At least if I was them, that's not how I would use resources. I would make sure that the things that I use the AI for actually have value that people are going to use. And if the use of that AI in that particular case is going to be just ignored because it's going to be considered misinformation, I'm not even going to use the AI inference in that case. So the byproduct of that is manifold. The first is that if they were doing this before, they were planning on doing this in the future, that compute, if it was going to be done locally, is likely not going to trigger on your machine. That means that your own power bill, as well as your phone battery life, is going to be extended. And we know that this was already part of the plan because of the Chrome Gemini Nano download to our local devices on any device that was running Chrome. That means that the power footprint that is going to actually cost you power bill, like, again, big tech not concerned about the power bill that you pay. As long as they can offload it to you, they don't have to pay it. And if you have to pay more, are you really going to be paying that much attention that, oh, wow, my power bill is $30 more expensive this month? Where did that come from? It turns out that, oh, it's just your use of electricity, where you're not realizing that, oh, actually, it's the Google SLM that's running nonstop on my machines that's actually causing this. Right? The next piece is The next piece is that running on your phone, that your phone is going to have limited compute resources. And if those SLMs are running nonstop to do these summaries or whatever, which are going to be done in the background, it's going to eat away at your battery life significantly more. And the likelihood that they're going to admit that they're doing that is probably pretty slim. But they are probably doing that. If there's no value in doing this anymore, there's a really good chance that they're not going to do that. So this is already a win. This is already a huge win for the public, for us people, because this AI slop that's probably happening in the background, or was planned to be happening in the background, that's probably not going to happen, or not going to happen like as much. The bigger thing, though, is if Gemini gives you answers on things related to summaries, where it's summarizing information and then telling you an answer that's complete misinformation, you could actually hold Google liable now for that misinformation. There's a lot of stuff you can do with that. And keep in mind, this was one of the earliest arguments that people were making, Microsoft was making with GitHub Copilot. They were saying that any of the code that Copilot was generating, Copilot's not responsible for, you're responsible for. It's basically trying to hand off all liability to you. They don't take ownership of any of it. Now, while this court case is specific to the summaries, the part that's interesting about this is a Gen AI outcome. This is an outcome where the system is analyzing data and then generating new data from that. When you think about code gen for systems, sounds to me like that's a very similar type of problem, that you're starting out with information about what to code or how to fix a bug, and then the actual solution is being distilled and generated by the AI. And therefore, if the AI is producing something that is buggy or faulty, suddenly now I think that the accountability of that is no longer just on the user. I can foresee then, as like a follow-up court case, something like this now for code, because we have historical precedents. And I'd be curious if maybe what we can do is try to find the actual source of this at some point. I would love to know more concrete details. The way that I tend to work is I'll look at things like this and say, okay, this sounds pretty interesting. I'm going to trust but verify. And the next thing to do is look at the actual court case that happened, try to understand those actual rulings, and try to get it directly from the source. Because right now, what we have is basically just a single signal on stuff. Hey, buddy, come on. You want to be part of the stream? Huh? The doggo has just decided to join. You want to come up here, buddy? Yeah? Come up. Come on. Want to come up? Okay, come on. Come on. Up we go. Okay, ready? Here we go. Here we go. There we go. Okay, doggo is up. Doggo has joined the party. Let's see how. Okay, you stay right there. All right. So, yeah, stay right there. Okay, you gonna leave? All right, Doggo has left the party. He just likes to make cameos. So I guess what I'm saying is what I anticipate, assuming this is real, that this opens up the door for many subsequent cases now where AI is giving bad answers, doing some sort of misinformation or something. Yeah, exactly. And we can now bring these back to the court and potentially have a change in outcome. I think the biggest side effect of this again, this is just me speculating, is that this could be the nail in the coffin to end the era of the AI slop. I think a lot of the AI slop has been because there's been no liability for the big AI companies in any of the things that they produce. So they can just produce this without any consequences. But if there are actual consequences now, they have to be much more measured in what they produce, which means you're likely going to get a lot less bad answers. But the other big thing is that all the compute that they were speculating they were going to need to do all of this crazy, big, whatever mumbo jumbo stuff, that could have decreased significantly. And if that's decreased significantly, then the need for these massive data centers could be decreasing significantly. Okay, that's awesome. So Mac is saying that this is from Munich, and that's wonderful. Now, whether or not that will translate to the United States, that part's unclear, but there's a lot of interesting, I think, growing global sentiment toward AI, specifically on how the landscape should change as AI evolves in like a global landscape. Now, the US is going to obviously do what the US does, but it doesn't mean that we will like turn a complete blind eye to this. I suspect that minimally legislation and folks in the legal space in the United States are minimally aware of this, and then may be asking some fundamental questions about should the U.S. be making similar types of decisions. Again, we don't know exactly how this will play out, but this is a massive win. This is a huge win for the people, because it basically is creating some level of responsibility for the AI companies where they've had basically no accountability up until now. And I love that. Super pumped. So Kat shared this with me earlier. And it sounds like there's a discussion on this in our Discord right now under general. So I'll have to find that. Actually, while I'm on the Discord, let me drop the Discord link. So for any of you guys that aren't on our Discord, you should definitely come on over. And the doggo's name is Merle. Well, his full name is Merlin, but he only gets called his full name when he's in trouble. Merlin. Most of the time, it's just Merle. Okay, so there's the link to our Discord. Totally free to join. It doesn't cost anything. You guys should, if you're not a member, strongly recommend you check it out. And as Kat was saying, we may move this to Slack or something else because it's a little bit of a handful. And I'm a terrible person. Sorry, I haven't gotten back to you guys. I'm between moves and a lot of stuff going on, but I'm going to start getting my life back under control, and I won't be such a lousy person. I appreciate you guys being patient with me. Whatever the case, this is super freaking awesome for the people. This is a massive win for all the people in the world because Google is now being held accountable for some of the AI slop. And it's not just being pushed off onto us. How this will affect the larger landscape, I think that we'll be able to figure out in the coming months. But we're starting to see, I think, outcomes that are not just centric on big tech and them thriving, but instead trying to help the little guy And I think Kat was showing me an example where she was asking Gemini to give some sort of summary of a situation, to do an estimate of costs. And the estimates that he was giving, that Gemini was giving, was so completely off target. It was something like 700,000 users of this system for a variety of different cases, and what the actual overhead would be of storing their data or something like this. And I think Gemini's answer was the annual overhead of this would be something like 25 to 75 cents for 700,000 people. Like, I don't even understand exactly what the problem is. All I know is that the actual overhead of storage, just to keep track of things, for almost 1 million people, costing, I mean, if that's reality, I want a piece of that. Because even in simple things like storing all the information for GTT, I have to buy these external hard drives, and those external hard drives cost hundreds of dollars. They're certainly not for sale for 75 cents. And that's orders of magnitude bad math. And for example, if you're using that type of summary system to do budgeting for a company, where you're saying, Google, here's all the stuff, give me the budget, and then you use that budget to drive things forward, and the budget is off by 2 orders of magnitude. Like, it says it's going to cost $10, or for example, let's make them real numbers. It says it's going to cost $10,000, but in reality, it's going to cost $1 million. That's a big price difference. That's not you're off by, 20%. You said $10,000 actually costs like $12,000, $13,000. Not a big deal. You're pretty close. That type of bad math, it may be acceptable, but you say it costs $10,000 and the actual outcome is $1 million. That math is not mathing. That's missing a couple zeros type of bad math. So guys, I'm really excited about this. It makes me delighted to know that the world is kind of waking up to the realities of big tech being responsible for a lot of the misuse of this, and it can't be this Wild West free-for-all that it's been over the last 4 years. And this is usually what happens, right? This is, for those of you that are not aware, and again, I'm not a lawyer, obviously, I'm a science nerd, but given the work that I've done running companies and then doing patents, I've worked with a lot of lawyers. I've worked with lawyers for at least the last 15 years. And they've taught me all kinds of stuff. And one of the things that they've taught me is technology always supersedes legislation. Legislation never supersedes technology. Legislation is always a catch-up game. That stuff is happening, and then the laws of the land are always following behind it in some cadence. And that's what we saw here. Technology marching forward, making tremendous strides, some of them really good, some of them really bad, and it being the Wild West. No legislation at all. And part of us that are on the frontiers of science, right, we're looking at this saying, where are the guardrails? Where are the safety? Like, do you really think that these companies can self-regulate? It seems like a conflict of interest. It's quite strange. And in many cases, the lawyers and the judges, they know this too. But they're busy and they're playing catch up and they're doing their best. So they're also learning. A lot of it is they're learning because they're not experts in this like we are, right? They don't have a PhD in AI, or they haven't built the stuff that you're building, Mac, where they understand stuff forwards and backwards. This is all new to them. So they have to spend a lot of time learning and then try to understand how that fits in the historical context of legislation for that country, for that state, for that county, all of these different layers. And then once they start to build up all of this, then they start looking at the evidence. And then all of this takes time. But finally, we're to the point to where I think they're starting to have enough of that infrastructure where they can start to make these honest rulings that will hold people accountable who should be held accountable, who know that they were getting away with murder. Not real murder, but, well, some of them actually, maybe real unaliving, but mostly just getting away with bad corporate stuff. That era is slowly getting corrected. And I anticipate this will be the first of many corrections that we all know have been necessary. And we were all kind of wondering, when the hell is this going to happen? And now we're seeing that it's starting to happen. I think that's really good. And it is all about balances, right? And it might be a little strange, me being a scientist and being so keen on locking down science. But this goes back to what we were talking about with the use of AI today and how certain laws should be put in place that it doesn't make sense that those laws aren't in place. For example, I don't know exactly what the legislation is, but there's some sort of rule in the United States that says if you're under the age of 13, you're not allowed to use social media or something without a parent. Something like this, right? You guys probably know this rule better than I do, but if you go to any of the social media sites, when you go to create an account, you'll see this, are you older than 13? And then if you say no, it's like, goodbye. It's just, that's closed. That's because there's a law, to the best of my knowledge, at least in the United States, that says you cannot have an account in social media if you're not at least 13 years old. That's a good law. I think that's a really good law because there's a lot of danger in social media. And while I don't think that the kids that are 13 and under are going to be doing, I mean, maybe in some cases they might be doing bad stuff. I'm not really worried about them. I'm worried about what the adults are going to do toward those children. Because there's some not great people out there in social media. You know, they're not like us where all we want to do is nerd out, play video games, and build things. They have other things in mind. They're not talking about technology. They're doing other things. And we don't know a priori who these people are. So the best path is to not risk the fact that children could be exposed to those people. Now, I'm of the strong conviction that the same type of legislation should exist for children. In fact, this would be a great time for a poll. I'm really curious about this. Let's first take a look and see how we're doing with the marathon. So, did anybody say no marathon? No one voted against the marathon. Okay, that's awesome. We just hit the 2-hour mark, and I'm still feeling good. I may have to switch the topics to something more chill, like movies and video games and music for an hour, just so I can turn my brain off a little bit, and then we go back into deep stuff. Because truthfully, even I get a little tired, and need my mind to like organize stuff, and I need to talk about things like Slay the Spire or my cool case for the Steam Deck. Like, for those of you that didn't see it earlier, look at that. This is like so retro. It's just retro awesome. Like $20 on Amazon. And that is the game I'm playing right now, Slay the Spire 2. I just unlocked the third dude. who I'm not loving, to be honest. He's I don't know. We'll give him a chance before we rule him out. Anyway, so now with this age thing with AI, I think I was going to create a new poll. How do I create a new poll? Do I hit this? I can't type. Control Enter. Yeah, hold on. Maybe I need to. The UI is still pretty. Oh, I think once you select a poll, it is a work in progress, guys. Okay, poll. What age should people be allowed to use AI? Over the age of 7. Over the age of 10. Over 13. 17. Over the age of 21. Here we go. And, so we have a new poll. Here's our poll. And you guys know the rules for the polls. Just enter in the number. So you say P3 space, and then whichever one you support. A1, anyone over the age of 7. A2, 10, 13, 17, 21. I'm actually quite curious to see what you guys think. Oh, and if you do answer and then you change your mind, you can change your answer because it keeps track of who you are and it'll automatically update this correctly. So the way to answer the answers, again, is you would say P3 space, and then you would type in the answer. And so I can already see that some people have entered in answers here. We've got 2 votes now for over the age of 13, 1 for 17. While people are giving answers, I have to say that I didn't want to give it too much bias by not giving possibilities for these younger ages because I could see argument for this. But I also, it's interesting because part of me thinks that maybe it's based on the content of the AI, like movies. So you've got the PG-13 movies, and you've got rated R movies, and then you have NC-17 movies. I could see how AIs could be similar. So if you have, let's say you have the Sesame Street AI, and it's rated G. Think about it like video games. You have an AI ranking based on specialization, like you would a video game, and then some games, My Little Pony, which, by the way, I think is an actual video game maybe, but I just bought this game. Speaking of My Little Pony, I want to show you guys this. There's this game that I just bought. It's this game. By the way, this is clearly a grift. This is a clear grift off of My Little Pony, My Little Puppy. And for those of you that don't know, I used to own 2 corgis, bless their hearts. They're in doggy heaven now. And I stumbled across this. And then when I saw that the main hero was a corgi, I immediately had to go buy this. And I actually even started playing this week. It's quite adorable. Anyway, so you might have a game like My Little Puppy. That's a G-rated game, and so everybody can play that. Then you might have another game like GTA, right? Which is okay. You got to be pretty mature to play this, and so on and so forth. So I think we'd have to think about this, and we'd have to think about if it relates to SLMs or LLMs. LLMs being broad, they would probably have the highest marker for any of the domains that they cover, but SLMs would be based on the specialization for the domain that they focus on. So the Sesame Street SLM, maybe anybody over the age of 7 can use it, but then for the John Wick SLM, you got to be over the age of 17 to use. I guess I forgot to add. Okay, so we have A6 now, which is, there is no, hold on, let me fix this. We have A6, there's no age requirement. That AI should be usable by anyone of any age. I just added this. So if you want to change your answer to A6, or you're holding out because you felt like there should be a no age, feel free to drop it in there. But minimally, it seems as though people do have views that there should be some age requirements. And I think so too. And that doesn't exist today. And I think that's something that we need to address. And I think that things like this Google case, this is an example of, wait, can I go back? An example of what's to come is that if this type of thing is happening, I think it's a very natural segue to start to get into legislation for other things. Like, one of the next big questions, I think, with AI that we should be asking, and I do think that there should be legislation around this, is what domains should AI not be able to exist in? Like, what domains are so sensitive that AI should not even be able to have a model that people can access to then interact on? Let me give you one that I think is top of mind for science. And that has to do with genetic engineering, cloning. So we have the technology today, to the best of my knowledge, where we can do some things related to cloning of things. Let's just limit it to like sheep right now. But I believe that we've successfully cloned sheep. And I think that in the United States, research in cloning is illegal. I think it is. Maybe we should try to fact check me. Okay. The AI overview, which I'm going to hold it accountable to if it's giving me bad summaries here, it's telling me that cloning legality in the U.S. is complex because there is no blanket federal ban. However, the landscape is heavily restricted. Human reproductive cloning, effectively banned nationwide due to strict FDA oversight, which requires an investigational new drug application that will not be approved for human cloning. Additionally, many states outright ban it. Okay. So, research into human cloning is banned. I think that that's probably good. I'm all for advancing science, but some scientific questions, if we crack that nut, guys, I think a lot of bad things could potentially happen real fast, especially for people that are very, very wealthy. Because I think they could start to do some really immoral things. And what is the name of the movie? The Beach? I think the movie's called The Beach. Okay. What is this? Is this it? Okay, maybe it's not The Beach. What's this movie? It's Ewan McGregor and... what is her name? The Island. Sorry, The Beach, The Island. Close enough. All right, this movie. If you guys haven't seen this movie, it's an oldie but goodie. The Island. And it gets into some interesting things that could potentially happen if we allow human cloning. So along those lines, disallowing human cloning, I think, at least in the short term, seems like a pretty reasonable thing to do. I think that kind of makes sense. Just so people don't start going too sideways. Inevitably, I think what's going to happen is the research is going to be done somewhere, somehow. And so you can't really, I don't think you really can stop it per se. But I think it would accelerate significantly faster if you didn't have any kind of restrictions on it. And I think that's definitely a nut that we probably want to crack more slowly because of the... once that technology exists globally, I think then it no longer is a question of if it's possible. It just becomes a question of should you use it now? And this is where I think it starts becoming a slippery slope, is certain people will have really good arguments on why you should use it, why they should be allowed to use it. Like organ replication, that could be life-saving, 100%. I could see very strong arguments for that. The downside, though, is how do you, what is the cost of that organ harvesting? Does that mean that you have to do full human cloning and a actual person has to be cloned and genetically engineered and created so you can harvest their organs? And then we get into some really deep morality questions. Anyway, along those same lines, I think that one of the open questions are things like domains that AIs should not be allowed to function in. And I think that there are some restrictions that exist today. Like they just won't, the AIs won't engage, or they're not supposed to engage in certain topics, specifically like those topics that help people unalive themselves. You guys know what I'm talking about? Oh, that's interesting. Hold on, I'm gonna get to this. This comment. Where did that go? Right here. 1984. There are at least 2 companies that will clone your dog. Yeah, so this is what I mean. This is really tough. Because as someone who loves dogs and a perpetual dog owner, who wouldn't necessarily want this? But then it raises really interesting questions about the spirit and, like, what is it your dog? There's just a lot of, what kind of psychological damage does this do to you when it's like you think that you're having a clone dog, and then in reality what you're getting is a dog that looks identical to yours and has a lot of the same genetic makeup, but then the actual dog, I don't know, there's a lot of really deep questions on this. Anyway, okay. I think we've hit the point to where I want to shift the conversation to be more chill and talk about stuff that is not nearly as high intellectual. So I can lean back in my chair and puff on this, and you guys can tell me interesting things that you've been working on. And then we can pivot back to like the hard science stuff. So before we do that, can we do another roll call now that we've got like a good 30 or so people on? Like, if you didn't dial in to tell us where you're dialing in from already, can you drop in where you're calling from? Oh, excuse me. So are you in the U.S.? Where in the U.S.? Are you in Europe? Where in Europe? Anybody calling in from Japan today? I know that we have a couple Aussies on. Anybody from New Zealand? Sean's asking, curious if you got Oregon. Sweet. That's great. Atlanta. Awesome. SoCal. Jalisco. What's going on, man? I didn't see you. Oh, Orange County. Lehigh. Fantastic. More Atlanta. A lot of USers. That's great. Yeah, I love Orange County. I think Orange County is probably my second place that I would choose to live, if not NorCal. The whole area down there is just, yeah, my kind of people. Still pretty techie, but pretty low-key. And definitely not the LA crowd. I think the LA crowd is a little too plasticky for me. No disrespect for anybody that's calling in from LA. I think that's Auckland. Yeah. Sweet. Yeah, it's hard not to love Orange County, right? Michael, he's dialing from the state of Missouri or Missouri. Keeping it real. Uruguay. What time is it, Juan, over in Uruguay? No, I almost went to school in Malibu. And so I really like Malibu. And I feel terrible about like the Malibu fires from last year. By the way, is anybody from Colorado? I hear Colorado was on fire, or maybe still is on fire right now, down in Colorado Springs or something. Oh yeah, yeah. Thanks for hopping on with us. LA is good for museums. Yeah, Pepperdine. This is a long story about Pepperdine. Lupo from Lehigh. Is that Lehigh University? And do I know you, Lupo? I have a feeling maybe I do. Oh, I gotcha. Yeah. Because probably some of the, when I do the late night ones, right? Because what time is it here? It's 8 now. Yeah, a couple of the, where did I end up going to college? So my college uh, trajectory is pretty interesting. I did my undergrad in Colorado State University in computer science, and I actually dropped out of CSU before I finished. Sweet. I thought it might have been you, Roberto. That is Professor Roberto, guys, from Lehigh. He's associate professor, maybe full professor, but super smart guy. Does research in parallel computing, distributed systems, and a bunch of other things. Great to have you on, Prof. Yeah, so Colorado State is where I started, and then I actually left before I finished my undergrad, and then I finished through community college. And I kind of took a little bit of a grudge against CSU because I had been TAing for computer science for about a year and a half, and I wasn't getting credits for it. But all I needed to finish my CS degree was just random credits because I had already done supposedly like all the hard stuff, but they wouldn't give it to me. And I was like, so it's just like a money thing here. So I dropped out, and then I later kind of got a clue and was like, okay, this is kind of stupid. And I finished my electives. It was like art appreciation, advanced weight training, it was whatever. And then I was given my bachelor's. And then for my master's and doctorate, I did at University of Colorado Boulder. And that was in computer engineering. And the shift there from computer science to computer engineering was more that I wanted to learn more about hardware. That at that point I had already created Notica and written quite a bit of code, but I didn't feel like I really grokked hardware at that point. And I wanted to kind of understand the whole stack. So then I learned more about computer architecture, microarchitecture, a lot about compilers, and yeah, just hardware design. That, of course, led me to Intel, where I spent like a decade. But then, so yeah, I did my master's and my doctorate at CU Boulder. And then I started my journey through academia as a professor, starting at CU Boulder to teach neural network architecture, basically AI, as a grad student and then as an adjunct prof. And then I went to University of Pennsylvania for 4 years while I was 1 foot in industry, 1 foot in academia. So 1 foot basically building kind of real world stuff, and then another foot figuring out the research side. because me personally, I like both sides of it. I like the real systems to engineer real things, not research things. And no disrespect to research, because research is some of the most challenging stuff that I've ever worked on. But there's a lot of value, I think, in building real software systems where you have to deal with the realities of all the technical challenges that exist that you can oftentimes kind of elide away when you're building these research prototypes. At the same time, I think doing too much where it's just engineering can pull you away from being on the bleeding edge of science because it's too focused on concrete embodiments, and it limits your thinking on some of these harder things where you're inventing technology that doesn't exist yet. So for me personally, I really like to have a foot in both spaces. And then in 2022, I left Penn and moved to Stanford. And I've been there since, 2022. And I kind of have no intention of leaving. I think the only way they'll get rid of me is if they just kick me to the curb. And it seems as though I haven't upset them enough yet to get kicked to the curb. Although I will tell you, I say some pretty risky things on GTT that I wonder sometimes if I'm going to get called into the dean's office and they're going to say, well, Goju, we really liked having you here, but you just pushed the envelope a little bit too much. And you're going to have to go find a new university. But at least for now, they haven't done that. Anyway, that's a little bit of my background, Sean. And I think it's maybe a good example of how you don't have to have... I think a lot of people get confused into thinking that the only way to end up at places like Stanford or MIT is if either you're born with the silver spoon or you're some child prodigy. I'm not like either of those things. I had really humble beginnings and certainly didn't have all kinds of money. Had to put myself through grad school personally. And it was a slow burn. And a lot of that was necessary. Like, I really would have no business teaching at a place like Stanford or MIT right after I finished my doctorate. There's no way. Like, I really didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I still don't know what I'm doing, but I understand it maybe a little bit better today than I did back then. But I'm of the mindset of the small footsteps, right? Small footsteps every day, and it's really amazing the places that you can go. And at least for me personally, it's sort of like a dopamine hit that I'm constantly focusing on trying to get small things done every day, and then I feel good about myself. This is why I think doing exercise on a daily basis can be really helpful, because exercise generally is hard, right? And you have pain, and that makes you kind of not want to do it. But then what I think happens after you accomplish it is you get a sense of like euphoria. You do get those dopamine hits. And then if you're doing certain exercise like cardio, I think you'll get the endorphin hits. All natural highs, right? And on top of that, you create, I think, a body of evidence for yourself that will slowly build a lot of confidence in you that you can accomplish all these cool things. And it's not just you sort of reading mantras to yourself about how amazing you are. It's you demonstrating it to yourself day in and day out. Like, I can do this. And you did it. And then over time, what happens is you build up such a body of evidence that you can do all these things because you have, that then you start to change your outlook on the stuff that you might have thought was impossible a year ago or 5 years ago or something like that. Suddenly doesn't seem so impossible. And it's a gradual thing. It's not you're going to jump straight to the top of the food chain. It's more just small footsteps. At least that's kind of my take on it. Okay. Oh, wow. That sounds like an awesome plan. How's the plan working out, Colin? Sean's asking, do you think we can vibe code an app that will produce business, or do you think there will be a lot of security flaws? If we can, what would be the next step to harden our software? So, yes, I think we can. I think we can vibe code our way to prototypes that will produce business. But then the real challenge kicks in. Then I think then we're faced with the real problem, which is how do we maintain the piece of software that we have that people like and keep adding features to it so that as people engage more and more, the system that we built gets better and better. And that's where I think that it really shifts from vibe coding to collab coding. I think it has to. Because if you just vibe code it, at least this is my experience, what I find is the AIs of today, because they're so driven for immediate resolution of the problems that you give it, then the work that's done to set up the actual foundations of the software are pretty minimal. And if you don't know at least a little bit about software engineering, I think it can be really hard to know what it's doing wrong. So for example, with the GCC system that you see all around you, one of the things I do is I'm constantly refactoring the code. And unfortunately, I kind of understand code, so I can look at it and say, oh, the structure here is not great. So here's what you need to do, Claude. Go and refactor this, and I want better separation of this. I think anybody can do this, but you need a small background on software engineering because you need to understand the general principles of software engineering that will help you build large-scale software. But you don't necessarily need to understand the syntax of code. And I'm of the mind that many of the modern languages you can look at and get a general sense of what they're arguing for just by looking at their structure. So for example, I'm not an expert. This is a pretty weak straw man, so don't hold me to this. But just as an example, I can look at code in other languages that I've never programmed in, and I can just get a sense of oh, I think I know what you're trying to do here, and you're not doing it in the best way. Now, I can do that because I've been looking at code and working at code for a long time. Will someone that has never looked at code before be able to do this? Maybe not right out of the gate, but if you can read in a natural language, then I think you can get intuitions about things just by looking at patterns. And then from that, you can start to give it guidance when you see that the patterns are kind of off-center. The patterns are not what they should be. They should have a different structure. Or this function it's sort of like, think about if you see a paragraph that lasts the whole length of a page. You don't really have to read that to say, this doesn't look right to me. Paragraphs shouldn't be 30, 50 lines long. You should have multiple paragraphs here. The same thing goes with code, is you can look at a function and see that that function is like 300 lines long, and it has all this nesting, and you're like, this just doesn't look right to me. So you should segment this into smaller pieces. And this is really what I mean about the difference with collab coding versus vibe coding, is that vibe coding, in my mind, is very much like you tell the AI just to do something and you never see any of the code that it's producing. And I think this can be pretty dangerous because the AI is given their priority mechanism, their reward system. They're rewarded for not all the right things. They're also rewarded to incur the smallest amount of compute overhead. And oftentimes writing really good software would require them to have more compute overhead. So having the ability to look at code is helpful, but you don't need to go, I think, all the way to where it used to be the case that you have to be able to write the code. Because these are two totally different things. For example, you can be a great reader and just read books and still be a terrible writer, because those are like different skills. And a similar thing happens with code, is you can be really good at reading code and not necessarily have the skill to write code. And I think that's totally fine if you get assistance from AIs and you know how to collab code. And ultimately, I think the only point I'm trying to impress is if you do it, if you use the AIs to generate software and you never look at the code, I think it can be a very dangerous proposition because they're writing a lot of spaghetti code that's just not good. But it doesn't mean that you have to be an expert coder. All it really means is you just have to get comfortable looking at code and then maybe asking questions or understanding general design principles on things like building modular components, making sure that the software systems are decoupled. And so you have a component that, like for GCC, there's a mouse interface system. The mouse interface system should be completely separate from the textual ingestion or output system. And that probably just makes sense sort of abstractly, that these are two different things. Those components should kind of be separate. And if you can do this, I think that you can build pretty reasonable apps. At least that's what I'm seeing. Could you use this to build something as big as like the Linux kernel? Maybe not. But for going back to your original question, Sean, I think that you absolutely can for any kind of like medium-sized piece of software. Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it, Sean, is you need to more just understand about testing environments and mechanisms you can put in place to help verify that the software that's being written can be validated. So it's all about building an infrastructure to where you know the stochastic AIs are going to make mistakes, but you have infrastructure in your system that will help keep them on target. Okay, need to take another quick short bio. So let's restart our little timer guy. We'll take a quick 5-minute break. With something here? Maybe it's, oh, over here? Yeah. And then we'll be back. Cool. Sean's saying what he ends up doing is taking what Claude writes and then take that code and see what Codex says. Interesting. Yeah. And I think that what we'll be able to do soon, once we have the new AI system that I'm working on, is we will have the ability to run that AI system on what those LLMs are producing and then improve them directly. We'll have that in some sort of feedback loop, closed loop, and it will help level it up. And those other systems will have built-in directives. Like, this is one of the beauties of doing these SLMs, is we can make the goal of them not to be just answering the question as fast as possible, but trying to make sure that it provides the answers to be as good as possible, knowing that there's a trade-off. Like, that would be sort of a dial, and you would drag it, say, give me the answers as fast as possible, and then drag it to say, give me the answer as best as possible. So then if you're in a rush or you don't really care, then you'll just quickly crank on fast answers. But then if it's something super important, you can say, no, take your time. Don't try to speed run this. Let's make sure we get this rock solid. Yeah. Do I think loops and harnesses will solve everything? No, I don't. But I think I know what you're saying. And I do think harnesses are a good first step. And I think closed loop systems are a good first step. But one of the biggest open challenges that exist today is we need to have more deep semantic reasoners. And we need to have better representation of knowledge, which is why we need things like diff or deterministic AIs that have semantic stuff built in. Like, we're in a really good spot with deterministic AI. With stochastic AI right now. That stuff is advanced pretty well. And it's goodish. What we need now are serious advances, I think, in the deterministic side of things, as well as the stuff related to confidence scoring. And what we need are really powerful deterministic AIs that can reason about data both like vertically and horizontally. Vertically being all the code that exists in your repo right now, and horizontally as in any kind of temporal window where the context and the intention of the code can be more deeply understood, which are things that you likely can only derive as you reason about things over time, as they change over time. That's my strong conviction. Yeah. And yeah, so Sean, we know at least initially that the beginnings of the disk system will work, and it'll work at scale. So that's fantastic. And we'll start building out the new AI system in Jan of 2027. There's still some open questions, but the goal there is really to build the entire open source suite so that people will have a new AI stack that will run in a completely local way and have an alternative to the LLM systems. It won't nearly be as robust or as general as the LLM systems, but it will be something that you can run totally locally and completely for free. And on top of that, you'll be able to fork the code yourself So if any point I do something that you don't like, you can just say like, sorry, Goju, I don't agree with the way you're driving this. So I'm going to fork it and I'm going to build out my own system. And I'll say, fantastic. That's why we open sourced it. So that's the beauty of this implicit trust, is you'd never have to trust me or anyone in open source, because the moment they do something that you don't like, you can just say, sweet, I'm forking this and it's going to be my own project now. Whereas with the stuff Dario is talking about, if Anthropic or OpenAI or Google make a decision that we don't like, there's no recourse for us. There's nothing we can do to say, we don't like that. You can't do that. I mean, no, they can do whatever they want. We are perfectly beholden to them. And I'm really not a fan of that. So anyway, guys, I think I'm going to wrap for today. We about hit the 3-hour mark. That's not quite marathon material, but it's pretty good. And this has been super helpful. If you guys aren't on Discord, you should definitely check it out. And please feel free to sub the YouTube channel if you're interested in these longer videos, and join as a member so you get the it's only 99 cents a month. That's the cheapest I could make it. But that has basically, what it allows me to do is I can have all of the live streams that go through my VOD processing and upgrade all the audio and the video to high quality, and then eliminates out all of the silence space, what I call the SR, silence removal. So what you get is basically a really streamlined instance of every live stream, and with no ads ever. Or you can just watch the live stream, because those will stay available. Anyway, yeah, this was great. Let's try to keep doing this every day. There's more stuff going on all the time. I'll keep you guys posted. Lots of stuff going on with the GCC system. As you can see, we've got all kinds of new things being built in on the daily. And I will say, yeah, let me drop the Discord link. I will say I'm starting to figure out, I think, how to build, do collab coding with Claude in a way that doesn't make me want to unalive myself every day. Because there was a period of time where it was just, I was getting really frustrated. And now I have tens of thousands of tests in place, and it makes significantly fewer mistakes. So what this is doing is it's helping me build out more and more advanced stuff into GCC faster. And my VOD pipelining stuff is cruising now. It took weeks to get that right, but now it's almost flawless, which basically means the time that it takes for me to go from a live stream to the clips and the curated content on the membership channel is really fast. It's almost a complete closed loop system. Yeah. And no, thanks to all of you guys for joining. This was super great. So with that,